They thought she was nothing more than a burden, someone to discard when life got comfortable. But what they never expected was that the very woman they abandoned would one day rise higher than they ever could dream. And when fate turned cruelly against them, it would be her door they came crawling back to. Margaret Wilson had never known an easy life. From the time she was a young woman, her days were filled with labor, scrubbing floors until her knees gave out, sewing clothes late into the night until her eyes blurred, and waiting tables at dawn while the world still slept. Yet in all her hardship, she carried a heart wide enough to love children who weren't even hers by blood. At 28, she adopted 3 kids who had been forgotten by the system: Lucas, Emily, and Nathan. She gave them her name, her home, and her whole existence, pouring every ounce of strength into raising them. In the small American town where they grew up, people often whispered, "Why would she take on children that weren't even hers?" But Margaret never paid attention. To her, motherhood was never about shared DNA. It was about showing up, sacrificing, and loving without conditions. She worked 3 jobs to give Lucas basketball camps, Emily piano lessons, and Nathan a warm bed. She often skipped meals herself, just so they would never feel the sting of hunger. They grew up believing they belonged, because Margaret made sure of it. But as the years passed, the children began to drift away from the values she had planted in them. Lucas, the eldest, grew arrogant in college, often dismissing her with lines like, "Mom, you don't get it. You wouldn't understand." Emily, ashamed of her modest upbringing, avoided introducing her friends to Margaret, embarrassed by the woman who raised her. Nathan, the youngest, barely spoke to her at all, burying himself in a world where his mother didn't exist. Behind closed doors, Margaret overheard their friends whispering cruel things. "Why do you still keep her around? She's dead weight." At first, she ignored it, telling herself they would grow out of it, that love was stronger than shame. But one Sunday afternoon, her world shattered. She had cooked a beautiful meal, the kind that carried memories of comfort: roast chicken, cornbread, apple pie. She set the table carefully, humming softly as her limp slowed her steps. Lucas entered with his friends, and without even sitting, folded his arms across his chest and muttered words that sliced deeper than any knife. "Why do we even let her stay here? She's just holding us back. She's nothing but dead weight." The words hung heavy in the air. Margaret's eyes darted desperately toward Emily and Nathan, silently pleading for them to defend her. But Emily only shifted in her chair, saying nothing, and Nathan stared at the floor, avoiding her gaze. Their silence was louder than Lucas's cruelty. The laughter of his friends sealed it. In that single moment, years of sacrifice were erased. By evening, her children asked her to leave, offering no tears, no hesitation, just cold eyes that no longer saw her as a mother. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as Margaret shuffled down the driveway, a small bag in hand, trembling, yet refusing to let them see her cry. They whispered, "After all she did for them, this is how they repay her?" But she walked on, head lifted though her chest burned with humiliation. All she had left was $1,000 tucked inside her pocket, a lifetime of sacrifice reduced to almost nothing. That night, she sat at a bus station bench, clutching her bag, the damp night air biting her bones. The smell of oil and rain clung to the concrete around her as strangers passed by, barely noticing her. When morning came, her body ached from the cold, but she stood again, limping through town in search of a place to rest. Rent was too high, shelters were overcrowded, and every door seemed to close before she could explain her story. By the 3rd day, hunger consumed her. She lingered outside a bakery, the smell of fresh bread making her stomach twist. Inside, 2 young women whispered, "Isn't that the old lady whose kids kicked her out?" Their pity stung more than her hunger. She turned away, refusing to beg. It was then, on the edge of town, that she saw it, the broken house, its roof half gone, windows shattered, grass growing taller than the fence. It was more ruin than shelter, yet something about it spoke to her. Perhaps she saw herself in its brokenness. The agent handling the property barely looked at her when she asked to buy it. "You sure you want this? It's not fit to live in, needs tearing down." But Margaret handed him every last dollar she had. When the papers were signed, she stood in front of the ruin. It leaned like an old man ready to collapse, the smell of mold seeping through the cracks. But it was hers. That first night, she lay on a broken cot inside, watching the moonlight through the holes in the roof, shivering under the weight of her own uncertainty, but whispering to herself, "This is not the end. Not yet." Every morning after, she rose to clean and repair. Her hands bled as she pulled nails from rotting boards. Her back ached as she scrubbed floors. But the work gave her purpose. Then one afternoon, while scrubbing stubborn stains, her broom struck something hard. Curious, she pried open a loose floorboard. Beneath it lay a rusted iron chest. Her heart raced as she cracked it open, dust swirling into the air. Inside were bundles of old documents, deeds, bonds, and at the bottom, rolls of gold coins glimmering faintly in the light. Margaret's breath caught. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of hope. She had stumbled upon a fortune hidden long ago, a treasure that destiny had tucked away until she was the one to find it. For years, she had been discarded as worthless, yet in the ruins, she had uncovered proof that she was far from finished. Carefully, quietly, she began to rebuild her life. She sold a few coins discreetly, enough to hire workers to fix the roof and paint the walls. Neighbors noticed the changes. "Where did she find the money?" they whispered, suspicion mingling with envy. But Margaret said nothing. She let them wonder as the house transformed into a shining white home with trimmed hedges and a welcoming gate. Margaret herself transformed too. She no longer walked with shame, but with dignity. Her clothes were neat, her chin lifted, her eyes sharp with resilience. She didn't stop at herself either. Using her newfound wealth, she opened a community center for struggling mothers and abandoned children, offering them the shelter and support she had once needed. When people asked how she managed it all, she only smiled and said, "Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in broken places." What she never said aloud was that she now had over $100 million at her disposal. While Margaret rose higher, her children's lives fell apart. Lucas's arrogant business ventures collapsed under fraud, drowning him in lawsuits. Emily's perfect marriage crumbled when her husband walked out, leaving her with nothing but debts. Nathan spiraled into addiction and gambling, owing dangerous men money he could never repay. By the time winter came, all three were destitute, shadows of the proud children who had once mocked their mother. Cold, hungry, and desperate, there was only one door left for them to knock on. One Sunday evening, Margaret heard a faint knock on her gate. When she opened it, Lucas, Emily, and Nathan stood there, clothes worn thin, faces hollow, pride stripped away. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Lucas's voice cracked. "Mother, we've lost everything." Emily sobbed, clutching Margaret's hand. Nathan hung his head, too ashamed to meet her eyes. Neighbors peeked from their porches, whispering, "Aren't those the same kids who called her dead weight? Look who's begging now." Margaret's heart wavered as memories collided inside her. She remembered Lucas's cruel words, Emily's silence, Nathan's avoidance. She remembered the cold nights at the bus station, the humiliation of pitying glances. But she also remembered their first steps, their childish laughter, the nights they clung to her skirts when storms frightened them. Her lips trembled as she spoke. "You threw me away when I was at my weakest, yet here you are at yours." The three fell to their knees, begging forgiveness, their tears soaking the porch tiles. Margaret's sigh carried both pain and mercy. She reached down, lifting each of them into her trembling arms. "I am still your mother," she whispered. And a mother does not turn away her own. She let them inside, not to forget, but to teach them that strength is never measured by what you own, but by what you endure. The same neighbors who once gossiped now told a new story. She rose from nothing, and even after all they did, she still took them back. They had called her useless, dead weight, a burden. Yet in the end, she proved stronger than all of them combined. And so, the story of Margaret Wilson stands as a lesson that no matter how broken life makes you, there is always hidden strength and sometimes even hidden treasures waiting to be uncovered.